From GeekWire.com in Seattle, I'm Todd Bishop. We're joined this week by two very special guests. Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web, and Academy Award-winning filmmaker Jessica Yu, director of the new documentary ForEveryone.net, which tells the story of the web's creation and evolution and foreshadows its future. It's great to have you both here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. So the film is making its world premiere at the Seattle Film Festival this weekend. And Sir Tim, in watching the film, it makes it very clear that the brain, that your brain is very much like the web. You think all at once, as one of your colleagues says in the film. It's almost like you subconsciously modeled the world's brain after your own. Is that an accurate observation? I'd love to get both of your takes on that, both Jessica and Tim.
Well, I know people suggested that actually it was inadequacies in my brain, that in fact I constantly need to note things down. I'm really bad at names and faces, so it could be that actually sort of it was some using bits of pencil and paper and drawing circles and arrows. So maybe it's more that the urge to use the web as a sort of brain extension. An
extension of your brain?
I'm not sure about that one.
Yeah, Jessica, did you find that to be the case, that that there are similarities between the two, Tim's brain and the world's brain in the form of the web?
Yes, I think what I also latched onto in the film was this notion of wanting to find connections that Tim has talked about, that meaning happens when ideas connect, when things connect, that the meaning is in the connections. And that's what the brain does. It connects things and makes associations. And so it became kind of like a conceptual point throughout the film. But some of our graphics definitely suggest that kind of brain connection. Yeah,
absolutely. Why was it important for you to tell this story? Sir Tim is obviously not a big public figure, and I want to talk about that later on, the irony of that, the fact that he's created such an amazing invention, but he himself is not a public figure. Why was it important for you to tell his story?
It's a good question. I mean, because I would call myself I was a passive, happy user of the internet. I really sort of unquestioning user of the web, and I think it was in learning about knowing about the threats to the web as we know it made me think, what is this thing that we have? And it was learning about the story of the origins of the web that made me think, we don't appreciate what we have in the web unless we know this story, because it's kind of a miracle that it exists the way it does, and that's thanks to Tim.
Tim, what's it like for you to have your story told in this medium? What's it like for you to watch the film, and what do you hope people will get out of it?
Well, when Jessica came to me started talking about the idea of making a film, the one of the big problems that we have is when you're trying to keep the web open to get people to become sort of activists for keeping it open and a neutral medium, is that when you talk about net neutrality, for example, it's famous for being really hard to understand, and in fact it's one of the simplest things. It's like the net should be a blank piece of paper, but when you say net neutrality is very important, then you get these glazed eyes. So I said, okay, Jessica, here's the deal. If you can explain net neutrality and its importance to ordinary people, then I'm in.
And you did, Jessica.
Of course, I'm nodding like, yeah, sure, we'll do that. Yeah, no problem. And then the number of different visual metaphors. I mean, that was definitely a challenge, because also I wanted to understand it. I wanted to have it, to try to explain it in a way that like my kids would understand it and everything. And so, and also that made sense for people who are really deeply in the thick of it, as Tim and his colleagues are.
Yes, and one of the most striking visual metaphors that you use is this system of highways, and the fact that highways in the real world are free and open, essentially, and creating a system where the net is not neutral would essentially result in alternative highways, slower highways, a highway that would treat people differently depending on the type of car that they drive. And so that's the gist that you get across.
That's right. And I think that was certainly helpful for me to understand it. And so trying to just make that work visually was quite fun.
Yep. Yeah. On this topic, Tim, in the film, you talk about your biggest fear for the web, and you say that some company or government or some combination of the two should end up controlling the web. And that's another way to look at the issue of net neutrality in the open web. How close have we come to that fear of yours, and how close are we to it now? What's the risk right now?
I think the risk is really really high. And when you say we have come close to it, there are places in the world where absolutely you are completely monitored as to what you do, and depending on what you do politically, you and your friends will be connected through your connections on the internet, and you'll all disappear in the middle of the night. So there are a lot of cases where the extreme of not net neutrality has happened, and in fact you've got a government controlling the web, and there's often also a threat of companies controlling the web. Constantly we're on the edge of finding that a company is getting to the point where actually it will control everything everybody sees. It'll decide which friends posts and which news articles a person sees, and we realize that we're talking about one big corporation suddenly having complete control of somebody's view of the planet in which they live. So yeah, it's a constant battle, and and we are very close to it all the time.
What should people do? I mean, that is part of the message from the film, is that people need to take action. What action should they take to prevent that fear of yours from becoming a reality more broadly?
Well, I think the film is great. It's actually, you found footage of people going into the streets with, down with ACTA, when ACTA was this agreement which was kind of, which needed to be fought to preserve net neutrality. And you found people at various different times going out there lobbying government agencies like in America, the FCC, and the FTC, and tracing how actually this made a difference. The fact that people out there rose up to protect the web in a way that never happened before meant that government agencies suddenly got input from the public in ways they never got before. So I love the way you've told that story, and I think that's a great, that's an example for other people about this is actually what you have to do. You don't have to just worry about it.
Well, and I think that Tim provided the greatest example of that in just the way that, okay, so people think the web is invented, boom, we have it, great, then whoever that person was, he must be the richest man on the planet. And that was not the case. I mean, Tim created the web as something that should be, how do you say that? That the web should serve humanity, so people should have free access to it. But what people don't know about the other part of that story is that then Tim has devoted his life to defending, nurturing, protecting, keeping the web collaborative, keeping it one web. And that's a story that's also very valuable and worth telling.
That's good. Given the power of governments and of regulatory agencies such as the FCC in the United States, as you look at the current U.S. presidential candidates, is there one candidate in whose administration you would most entrust the future of the web?
I think that's unfair for me to just... I think if we talk about the election now, A, we'll get very, very sidetracked because it's a ridiculous election, and B, we will end up making political comments. Whereas, and I think one of the really interesting things about the whole net neutrality issue, the whole issue of keeping the internet open, is actually it's been completely non-partisan. It's you have people you have people from the libertarian side protesting our ability to communicate. You have people from the liberal side, even though sometimes are very different. They see them to be different parts of the political spectrum. You have people seeing it as being conservative values and liberal values, because this, in a way, it's very constitutional. It's very non-partisan. It becomes more of a human rights issue, really. It's the right to be able to use this a neutral medium to do whatever I need to do as a human being.
Yeah, absolutely. The film opens with a series of montages, including the scene from the Olympics, the London Olympics, and the series where Meredith Vieira and Matt Lauer talk about you, and Matt Lauer makes that kind of unfortunate joke about not knowing who you are. They both do, and I went back and watched the whole thing, and then he says maybe you should Google him. But it speaks to the point that you've really lived a low-profile life, despite the magnitude of your invention, and I know that's purposeful on your part, Tim. Do you think you would be in a better position to defend the future of the web if you chose to be more of a public figure? Has that ever crossed your mind?
Well, I don't think going into politics would help, really. I think that in a way there's a strong movement. A lot of people, if you're interested in helping keep the web open, then there are a lot of organizations out there that do it, like the Web Foundation, like lots of non-profits, and so there's a community of people there that people can latch into. And anyway, I don't think it's in a way. If it were one great big system that I controlled and I made all the money from, then it wouldn't be the web. It wouldn't be open. It wouldn't have the same innovative power. It wouldn't be because I'd be in the loop. Right? If you wanted to start a cool new website, you'd have to come and ask my staff and register and ask for whether we deem to allow you to be part of it.
Almost like you have to get Apple or somebody else to approve an app.
There are some worlds in which we have. There are lots of closed worlds out there, and there were before. AOL was a closed world, which tried to be very dominant before the web, which was that was also a walled garden in which AOL made sure that you had the best experience. But it could never be as good as the experience you had outside the walls of the garden in the jungle.
Yeah. So we talked about your expression of your greatest fear for the web as expressed in the film, that a government or organization would control it even more than might be happening now. What's your greatest hope for the future of the web? If you could project out 5 to 10 years longer, what would be your greatest hope?
I think that the principles that the film points at are become adopted as part of the culture. That we realize that these things are they become. We add them to the list of human rights, just as we add water. There was a time when most people didn't have water, and now most people have water. So we say, you know what, we're going to make it a world where water is a human right, because we want to live in that sort of a world. We want to wherever our grandchildren end up living, we like them to be able to demand water. And say the same thing. Wherever our grandchildren end up living, we think they should be able to have the right to connect and talk to whoever they want. So that really is elevating it to that level.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in that world, do you have preferred paths to get there, to that type of world where it is actually a fundamental human right? And I realize that the W3C Foundation heads in this direction, but what is the path to get to that point?
There's not one path. Anyway, I think that when you look at the movie, you see that different people in different places in the world have realized, whoa, at this point, it's up to me to go out in the street and make a banner, or it's up to me to join a group, or it's up to me to, make a movie. Because actually by playing this role, by going to see this government official at this point, or just protesting, as I don't renew my agreement with my phone company and move to another phone company because I realize that I've got a choice of an open one and a closed one. The little ways in which everybody's got different ways in which they can help, or if they don't help themselves, teach others to.
Understood. I touched on this very briefly, but what is your take on the world of apps and the balance of power between the open web and closed apps right now? Do you see that continuing more toward closed apps in the future, or will there be a rebound back toward the open web?
Well, to a certain extent, there is a rebound back towards the open web, because I think people realize that if you take your magazine, for example, you take your blog and you make it into an app, unless you are very careful and build your app so that it looks as though it's part of the web, so that you can bookmark everywhere, and so that you can mail a link to things. Then if you're not on the web, it might be a great magazine, it might have a great UI, but you're not part of the discourse, because I can't blog about you, I can't link to you, I can't tweet about you, I can't like you, I can't dislike you. And if I can't basically reference you using a URL, then you're not adding to, you're not part of this the whole, which is so much more massively bigger than the sum of its parts. So there's just a natural gravitation back toward the open web because of its capabilities to connect everybody. Is that accurate? Because this blog that you're making right now, it is part of a larger discourse, and it will be, and the fact that it's on the web I hope, and will have a nice, easy-to-find URL, means that people will be able to just tweet about it, bring people right here, and start discussions in all kinds of different fora. That is how the web is a really powerful agent of change.
That's great. You are also involved with the MIT Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab. What is the intersection of AI and machine learning and the web, and where do you see that headed in the coming years?
Now we're getting a little bit off the topic, but interesting road though. AI is important. I see, to a certain extent, a lot of the pieces of computing, the power that computers have, a lot of it has been done in the aid of AI. So, for example, computers which can understand your speech, that is part of AI. Computers that can speak to you, computers that can solve problems, computers that can find a way plan a way across the city, and then change their advice when you get lost. That is all part of AI. So lots of the things which we think of now as just being part of my phone is actually part of the big AI plan. And the big AI plan ended up with producing intelligence which can do everything that we can do. I think that I agree with the people who feel that that's going to happen, and we need to be careful what happens. My worry is that we may have some people who develop AIs in responsible labs, but then, for example, the military labs, the cyber warfare, maybe less controlled, and people may end up developing AIs which end up getting the better of us and becoming the dominant race. So, yep, in the long term, the AI is an issue. In the short term, it's just going to make life more and more easier and easier. And yes, jobs will change, but jobs have been changing for a long time.
Yeah. Good. I'll bring it back to the film here and I'll ask Jessica. No, that's good. But no, it's fascinating. It's very fascinating. You've got a unique window into those two intersections into that intersection because of your history and your current work. Jessica, you've had a unique window into Tim's life through this film. I was struck by how respectfully and yet truthful it is about him in terms of the way his brain works and the way he operates. How should history look at Tim and his invention? What's your take on where he fits in the world of innovation and the legacy that he should have?
Well, we actually had the opportunity to film at the Museum of Science in London, and they have a new section that's all about technology and invention and the web. And Tim, they are the original Next computer upon which Tim invented the web is there. So it is part of that continuum, but having looked at the story and seeing the immediacy of the impact, and as Tim says, there is much more that can be spread. There's billions of people who do not have access, but the speed at which it became so much a part of our lives is, to me, is unprecedented. So I think that, but again, I like looking at the story in the bigger context of this. Also was a very idealistic invention in a lot of ways, because in its origin, Tim knew that if people didn't bring something to it, if they didn't collaborate, if people didn't buy in with their own ideas and efforts, that it wouldn't take off. And the fact that it did is, it's a wonderful way to look at what people can do together, as Tim says. I
think that's one of the most fascinating scenes in the movie, when you realize that the web at one point was there on your Next computer. It was there. You could have unplugged it and moved on, and where would we be today, right? Is there actually anything you would have done differently, looking back on the early days, when you had the web on that computer of yours?
Well, I suppose the classic thing is that of the HTTP:// I could have designed out the // made it unnecessary, and that would have saved so many keystrokes since then. But that wouldn't have been a fundamental change. It would have been a little cosmetic change. I think partly I'm now, if I would realize the dependence we have on the domain name system, anybody can start a website, but actually you need to get a domain name. You have to get something like foobar.com. And to get foobar.com, if foobar is a good idea, the fact that the domain name system is, I think, not being very, very well managed, the fact fact that somebody will be squatting on that and just selling it to you. So I think the reliance on the domain name system is something that maybe I'd look at differently next time.
What would you do differently, though?
Well, one possibility will be start my own domain system and charge people, or just to be aware of the issue and have very much more voice, and to say, well, using the domain name system, but here's the deal. We want a world in which companies can't buy more than two of these, or some set it up so that the squatting isn't appropriate, and have the whole thing run by a non-profit instead of by a for-profit, actually.
Yeah. We're talking with Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web, and Jessica Yu, who is the director of the new documentary ForEveryone.net, which tells Sir Tim's story and talks about the web's creation, evolution, and its future. Just in closing here, you're about to show the film at the Seattle Film Festival. What do you hope, each of you, that the audience walks away with this afternoon, and what's the underlying fundamental message that you hope they have?
Understanding net neutrality.
Pounding your fist on the table. Understanding net neutrality and being positioned to take action or to engage with that issue in the future, it seems, from the film.
I would say, yeah.
And understanding that if they use the web, if they spend 95% of their life or 98% of their life using the web, the other 2% they should spend thinking about how they should preserve it, help fight for its openness.
Great. Jessica Yu and Tim Berners-Lee, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you again.
Yeah, best of luck. Until next time, I'm Todd Bishop. You're listening to GeekWire on Kyra Radio 97.3 FM.